All right, so that's a big game, perhaps an elimination game when it comes to the college football playoff. Now time for take a look at our championship game of the week, championship drive game of the week preview presented by Dr. Pepper. Again, we've got Jake Browning, Justin Herbert. It's Washington taking on Oregon. Again, both teams with one loss, perhaps an elimination game here at 3:30 Eastern on ABC and ESPN2. You look at those total QBR numbers. Herbert was just masterful in that tough loss against Stanford. See if he can rebound here again on the national stage. So, Emmanuel, start with you. Is the winner of that game between Washington and Oregon a playoff contender, no matter who wins it?
The winner is a contender, but there's a caveat, Chick. It depends on who wins. Okay. It has to be Washington to win for them to be a contender. Washington's sole loss right now is out of conference. What that means is it's a little bit harder to gauge. It's a little bit harder to judge. Oregon's loss, on the other hand, is to Stanford, a Stanford team that is on a downward slide. So each and every week, that loss is starting to look worse. If Washington wins, I think the Pac-12 is in good hands. If Oregon wins, it's a little dicey.
No, I don't agree with that, Acho, because how can we say the loss looks worse? They lost by, frankly, poor coaching at the end of the game against Stanford. That was a close game in a conference that is pretty evenly matched. If you look at the big picture, a one-loss Pac-12 conference champion, which Oregon would be if they win this game, has a very big right, just like any other conference, to be considered for the playoffs. A one-loss Big 12 has that same right, one-loss SEC, one-loss ACC. So you look down the road, a narrow loss to Stanford should not knock them out, regardless if Stanford lost 5, 6, 7 games. Look at Clemson last year. They lost to Syracuse, who was pathetic, and they still made their way in the playoffs. So Oregon has every chance, just like Washington.
Here's the thing, JV. We got to be realistic. People view the SEC in a different light. So whether we like it or not, whether we agree or we disagree, a loss to Stanford, who has now gone on to take some bad L's, is different than a loss to Auburn week 1 of the season. A loss to Stanford week 3 or week 4, several weeks into the season, is different than an opening week loss to an out-of-conference opponent.
So this is why
I agree with you in some degree.
It's not different. This is why it's not different, because losing to Auburn, who has 2 losses now, could potentially have 3 or 4 losses on the season. Week 1, it's the same loss. It has the same weight as losing to a Stanford right now, because they both stink. And so all we have to look at is how many games did they win? How many teams did they lose? And if you look at the college football playoffs and what they've done historically, one-loss division conference champions usually get in. Sometimes they don't, but they have a better chance of getting in if you're a one-loss. That's all they look at, one-loss champion.